I thought someone else had found the secret room in my church. By Simple Homework 3510. Churches always have secrets. They are too old and too important not to. I used to enjoy the fact that I knew all the ins and outs of that building, but now I wish that I didn't. Over the course of the last year, I've been slowly earning back my parents' trust. If you ever went to college and met a guy who started out a devout Christian and ended up a drunken failure, you know what I was like. It apparently happens fairly often. People like me just can't handle suddenly not having their overbearing parents no longer watching them, and go a little too far with their freedom. I dropped out and had to crawl back to my family, where I went through the 10 steps, and I like to think I've turned myself around. Despite my thoughts, however, my parents have been reluctant to trust me again. So in order to get them back on my side, I've been doing a number of favors for the church on my own time, as it's quite frankly the only thing that seems to work. Slowly, I've been inching my way towards my failure being a joke that we laugh about, instead of a thing we pretend didn't happen. Today, I had volunteered to get rid of some rust that had started growing on the metal legs of some stairs on the church balcony. Rust dissolver takes some time to set in before you can actually scrub it away, so I had a half hour to wait, and I unfortunately got nostalgic. Both my parents worked within the school that the church was associated with. Over the 24 years of my life, I've lived and breathed this building. I know about the secret tunnel that was made in the 80s. I know about the hidden elevator that's used just for a storage room. I've been in every room of the original campus. Until today, I thought I was the only person who had. In order to get across how strange and unsettling what happened is, I need to give some background on the church as a building. The original campus was created over 100 years ago by German immigrants. The building was made out of brick and has glass windows so old, valuable, and irreplaceable that they are protected by bulletproof glass. 50 years after that, they built on the first addition. The church has a Gothic revival architecture, the kind that you see stand out in the middle of a modern city. The first addition is simply a block. It's a brick block that they built onto the side. It is as simple as can be. Then they started getting the checks. During my lifetime, the church made 2 more additions to the original campus, modern and sleek in a way that contrasted that old German brick. In a way, you can almost view the passage of time by walking around the city block that the church had spread out to. From there, at least 3 other schools had been branched out. When I went to the school on the original campus once every 2 months or so, we would have an assembly where a new comically large check would be presented from some incorporation or company, and all the students would all thank the nice businessman in unison. Every room in this campus is used. Kids are pouring out of the windows during the school year, and in the summer, multiple groups use the campus as a base of operations. Out of all the hard-to-find nooks and crannies, only 2 places are really secret: the tunnels I mentioned earlier, and the second tower. Like any good church worth its salt, this one has a bell tower. It's used every week and isn't a secret at all. But when they built the church back in the 1900s, they copied blueprints from a church back in Germany that had 2 towers. At the time, the large checks had not started coming in, so they didn't end up finishing the second tower. Instead, they roofed it off at around about half of the 3/4 of the height of the main tower and left it. From the outside, you can see the difference clear as day. Until today, I thought that me and my dad were the only ones who knew how to get to it. As I said, when I was waiting for the rust dissolver to set in, I got nostalgic. The balcony where I was cleaning was in the upper part of the church and had a small door that took you to the bell tower. I had been up there a few times for different reasons, but the one that I always remember was when I went up on September 11th, 2013. And yes, before you comment, I know I've been talking about towers, but the only relation that date has to this story is why I was going up there. A fire station is about 2 blocks from the church. I was born right before 9/11, so every year of my life except the first, the bells have been rung in 4 sets of 5 to honor the firefighters that gave their lives. Specifically, what the school does is they bring all the kids out and line them up by the station and have them all stand still with the firefighters. I was 12 at the time and had gone on that silent walk a number of times. Students never really stayed quiet, and the teachers had to stay on their toes in order to try and keep the whole thing presentable. A few teachers came down with the same flu some kid had brought in, and it was all hands on deck. So in order to save another teacher, they pulled me from the line and told me to meet my dad on the balcony. My dad told me on the way up that they picked me because they knew if I fell down and broke my leg, that my family wouldn't sue them. The tower was filled with scrapped old metal from past repair that had piled up over a century. Plus, the wooden steps that led up had gaps that a stupid and small person could potentially go through. So, taking a goody two-shoes like me with their dad watching them was probably the right choice. If you are wondering why 2 people had to be present to operate the bell, you have to ring the bells and also stop them. If you didn't stop the reverb, it would go on for too long. So 2 ropes hung from the ceiling at different points, one for each purpose. Similar to that stupid rust dissolver, we had a bit of time to wait until the bells were needed. For whatever reason, my dad was in a great mood. He let me walk up to the actual ceiling, which is crazy, as I think about it, as it wasn't even stairs that went up. Literal floorboards had been shoved into the side of the wall that you climbed up. It was awesome. On the way down, I had the ability to look on the other side of the pile of scrap metal, and noticed that a rectangular door was on the other side. My dad let me shimmy past them and open it up. It was the attic of the church. As I said, the first tower is the tallest, and the second is a little shorter. But the attic was the portion in between that was probably 1/2 as tall as the bell tower. It was very dark, but on the other side was a door with light outlining. I asked my dad to borrow his phone so I could use the flashlight on it. He tossed it to me and told me to keep track of time as I needed to be back in around 5 minutes to help with the bells. That sounds so bad for a parent to do, but I swear this was the only time I can remember my father being like this. Flashing the light around the room, it's made of 3 platforms with 2 large gaps in between. At the bottom of the gaps were wool insulation. I remember thinking I would probably live if I fell down. To the right of the door through was a few wooden planks nailed together. I picked it up and put it over the first gap before walking to the middle. Then I picked it up again to walk to the door on the other side. As you probably guessed, that door led to the other tower. When I opened it up, the room was yellow, old and deteriorated. I honestly didn't feel safe about stepping foot into the room because I was worried about whether or not the floor would collapse. But across that small room was a ladder leading up and a window that the light outline of the door was coming through. My dad shouted out for me to come back. I had spent so long getting across that the 5 minutes were almost up. I turned back and rushed across the planks, and I rang the bells with my dad before going back to class. I was remembering this when I thought to myself, why not go and see what was up that ladder? So, I went up, and after pushing some metal around, I managed to crouch down into that square door. When I turned on my phone's flashlight, I looked around me to see where the planks were. They were not near the door. I looked up and down the sides of the attic I was standing on and didn't see them. Flashing my light over to the other side, I managed to find them. They were placed so that you can move from the middle to the other tower. In my head, I was still contemplating this when the room became darker for just a second. A shadow had washed over the light that was coming from the door as I heard the sound of creaking wood. It took me a second, but I realized what that meant. Someone was in the room and had walked across, blocking the window. Rushing back to the balcony, I decided to wait for my 30 minutes to end by staring at the bottom of that staircase, hoping that some old janitor would eventually walk down. They didn't. Instead, nobody came down. The timer on my phone went off, and working as fast as I could, I wire brushed the metal legs till they shined. During that time, I had convinced myself that whoever was in that room was probably a janitor and was just as curious as me as to what was up there. So after I calmed down a bit, I went back up and called out to see if someone would respond. I heard nothing. As I stepped into that square door, my feet immediately stepped onto something. The planks were back on this side. I would have sworn to you that nobody could have possibly come down without me hearing or noticing. My curiosity was higher than ever, so I picked up the planks and made my way across. When I opened the door, I saw that the old yellow floor I remembered had caved in. No ladder existed. Whatever room it led to had gone with the floor. Looking down, it simply went into the top of some square white ceiling tiles at the bottom. I stared stupidly into the void and thought. Whatever did block the light wasn't in the room and walked across the window. They walked across the door on this side. Just as I realized, I heard the door slam on the other side, and the sound of rushing feet on old wood. The sounds became slowly quieter as I stood still. A few minutes passed before I managed to breathe again. I don't know who is up there or why they didn't say anything when I was visible the entire time. When I looked around more in the attic on the way out, I was expecting to find a pile of cans or trash or something to indicate it was a squatter. But the room was empty. The only thing not bolted down was the plank to cross. Attempting to not make it obvious I had been in the attic, I brought up if anything big needed to be repaired while I was gone at college. Eventually, with enough steering, my mom mentioned that the other tower had collapsed on itself during the short while I was at college. Luckily enough, it was only the wooden floors that had rotted through, and the walls were solid enough that they just tossed it all away and put up a new ceiling in the deacon's quarters, where the debris had fallen into. I don't want to bring this up with my family because I know they would think I was drinking again. But whoever, or whatever that was, can't just be allowed to stay up there. Plus, odds are during the 2 times I was in that attic, they know what I look like. I don't want to have to worry about some psycho following me from church one day, so they don't get ratted out. If you have any ideas, let me know. I'm open to anything.